Okay, we are live and welcome everyone back for another week. And this is your last week before you go on break. So this morning's subject, we start off with stormwater, water quality coordination efforts. And I think we have a list of folks that want to talk about it. Peter Walk is first on our list, the Commissioner, Department of Environmental Conservation. Peter, are you with us this morning? Yes, he is.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for having us all here today. I think this is an important conversation to highlight the coordination between the two agencies as we work to address clean water. For the record, I'm Peter Walk. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Sorry that we're not in person, but that's the nature of the beast these days. Welcome to my kitchen. I am grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to frankly just introduce the team that has been working on these issues for years now, and really talk about the coordination that's happening and the good work that's going on, because my role is only to facilitate, empower, and cheerlead, frankly. So grateful to this team, both from the Agency of Transportation and our team within the DEC. For the great work that's been done. So I'm mostly here to support and help with any policy questions that might come up, and then to let the team provide you with the details. So with that, I'm going to kick it off and hand it off to Emily Byrd.
Okay. Morning, Emily.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm going to try to share my screen. Hi, Liz. It looks like I don't have permission to share my screen.
Yeah, let me just get that, sorry.
Thank you. Have a few slides that I'm going to use. Thanks so much for having me. For the record, I'm Emily Byrd. I'm the DEC Clean Water Initiative Program Manager. And our team coordinates across state government to provide clean water funding, implement clean water projects, and to do the tracking and accountability related to all of this work. So today I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of those coordination efforts and how that works, and provide some highlights from our 2020 performance report. So let's see if I can share my screen now. Looks like I can. Great. Okay. Oops, I'm just trying to get, here we go. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint slides?
Yes, yep.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. Vermonters value clean water because it provides access to safe drinking water, improves property values, and supports recreation and tourism. Most of Vermont's waters are safe for swimming and fishing. However, we do suffer from some water quality challenges. Most of the challenges that we are dealing with in the state of Vermont are associated with nutrient and sediment pollution. And nutrients are a good thing, and they're necessary to support life. But when there's an imbalance of nutrients in our waters, it can lead to some water quality issues. And also, I wanted to highlight that due to our rural characteristic, most of these water quality challenges are sourced from what we call non-point source pollution, meaning that the pollutants are transported into our surface waters from rain runoff or snow melt, and it really requires working together across all different land uses to address these challenges. And when there is that nutrient imbalance, it can lead to some challenges in water bodies that may present differently. So in the state of Vermont, most of our state is covered by these large-scale water quality restoration plans that we refer to as a total maximum daily load, or TMDL. This map shows that most of the state is covered by these plans, and for the Lake Champlain Basin in dark green and Lake Memphremagog in light green, the nutrient of concern is phosphorus, and the phosphorus imbalance in these water bodies leads to harmful and sometimes toxic cyanobacteria blooms. And then on the eastern side of the state, the Connecticut River Basin, that drains to Long Island Sound, and the state of Vermont is part of a 5-state TMDL to address nitrogen imbalances in the sound, which leads to low dissolved oxygen in the water column and makes it difficult for aquatic life to survive. So while we are working to implement projects to reduce nutrient pollution under these large scale TMDLs, we're also benefiting local water quality and addressing local water quality challenges.
So
And-
Emily, I have a question. Several years ago, we implemented an incentive for towns to, if they did their road improvements at established standards, to prevent erosion, the way in which they ditched and used crushed rock, etc. Have we, perhaps it's too early, but in looking at this, our goals and looking at what action we've taken in the past, are we beginning to see, or I guess this is a long term before we're going to start seeing the results, but I guess it does raise the question of, have we put in place the very mechanisms or strategies that are necessary to address the water quality situation that we currently have in place? Because it obviously, it's not just the state of Vermont agency, but working with our local towns with their roads and their issues. So I don't know if you can speak to that at some point, but it would be helpful, because oftentimes we take action, then we kind of forget, and it's sort of like a need to touch base. What progress or what more?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. We are definitely going to share some of the results a little bit later in the presentation, and Jim Ryan will do a deeper dive into the municipal roads general permit and what progress has been made in that front. And at a high level, I'll just add that when the Lake Champlain TMDL was put into place and the state of Vermont made a pretty substantial commitment to this work through the Vermont Clean Water Act, or Act 64, back in 2015, that really put in the programmatic building blocks that were necessary to set the stage for successful implementation of the TMDL for Lake Champlain, as well as Memphremagog and the Long Island Sound TMDL. And the good news is we didn't just put that plan on a shelf. We actually have the tracking and accountability to report back to you, the public, and the Federal Environmental Protection Agency on how we're doing. And that reporting also provides a feedback loop to our planning efforts to better identify where we need to do more to target resources. So I think you'll find that we are making some progress on the implementation front. And of course, you brought up a really great point that it's going to take time for these large water bodies to respond. These water quality challenges were created over the course of decades, and it's going to take time for the water bodies to recover, but we are making progress. Thank you. All right, and this chart shows generally what process we follow for coordination across state government in our Clean Water Initiative efforts. On the far left is funding. Each year, the Vermont Clean Water Board goes through a public process to provide a budget recommendation for the capital bill and the Clean Water Fund related to the state's clean water efforts. Those funds are recommended to be appropriated to the agencies in state government that administer clean water funding. That includes the Agency of Natural Resources and Department of Environmental Conservation, where I work, as well as VTrans, Agency of Agriculture, Agency of Commerce Community Development, and the Agency of Administration. So the board makes its budget recommendation, that goes through the legislative process, and then eventually those funds are appropriated to state agencies. And then the state agencies utilize planning processes to prioritize the use of those funds to the projects with the greatest water quality impact. And Basin Planning is a 5-year scientific framework cycle that we work through to identify the water quality challenges in different regions of the state, identify what actions need to be taken and prioritize to address those water quality challenges, to coordinate the implementation, track our results, and then provide that iterative planning feedback loop, identifying where we may need to do more. And Basin Planning integrates the results of many different planning efforts across land use sectors, including the municipal road erosion inventories that are being done under the municipal road general permit. So once we have our priorities in place, then state agencies are working to implement clean water projects across all different land uses. These are projects implemented across the landscape to intercept pollutants, including nutrients and sediment. And a lot of these projects also provide other co-benefits, such as enhancing flood resiliency or providing habitat enhancements. Primarily, the road-related funding is administered through VTrans, where agricultural funding is administered through Agency of Agriculture. DEC mainly is administering funding to support stormwater treatment and natural resources restoration. So, for example, restoring floodplains to their natural state so that floodwaters can spread out on the land and absorb some of those nutrients that would otherwise be transported downstream. And DEC also has its Clean Water State Revolving Fund program to support the municipal wastewater treatment efforts. And then as we are implementing these efforts across the landscape and across state government in partnership with local municipalities and other partners, we are working on an annual basis to compile data on the projects that are being funded and completed, and putting those data together in our annual performance report. And that provides the accountability for the investment and how we're doing and where we may need to do more. I'm going to take just a little bit of time to highlight some of the elements of that annual performance report, and I included the performance report in the materials. If you want sort of the cliff notes, I recommend taking a look at the executive summary as well as Appendix A, which summarizes those data by the different watershed regions of the state. So the performance report is produced annually. We work together across state government to put this report together. It has two parts. The first part is the Clean Water Investment Report that fulfills our statutory reporting requirement on the investments that the state is making in clean water projects and also the results of those investments. And we do that in the form of project output measures, such as miles of municipal roads improved through these projects, as well as we estimate the pollutant reductions associated with projects that have been constructed or implemented. So that part one is really focused on state funding programs in this green circle of the Venn diagram. And as you can see, state funding programs may leverage federal funding and may also support the regulatory compliance costs. And then part two of the report zooms out the scope a little bit further to include the progress made under all three of these program categories: state funding, working with federal agencies to include results of their investments, as well as looping in the results of regulatory programs which compel the implementation of clean water projects, such as the Municipal Roads General Permit, which compels implementation of municipal road best management practices. And part two of the report is our Lake Champlain Tmdl progress report that we are required to produce annually to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, summarizing our progress implementing the Lake Champlain Tmdl. And there's a schedule within the Tmdl where EPA will be issuing us report cards, letting us know if we are doing enough or where we need to do more, and really holding our feet to the fire in terms of following through with the implementation of this work. Okay, and I'm going to highlight some data elements from the performance report this year related to the developed lands, in particular roads. This table summarizes the project outputs associated with developed lands projects implemented or constructed for our reporting period of state fiscal year 2016 through 2020. In particular, I'd like to highlight the second row on miles of municipal road drainage and erosion control improvements. You can see since we put our tracking into place and we really ramped up funding, so we're funding more practices and we're better tracking them. Each year from 2016 to 2019, there has been an increase in these results. I will note that in 2020, it was a little bit of a dip in our results, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic affecting first a shortened field season last year, which limited the time available to do these projects, and then also municipal capacity related to the pandemic. And where requested, we did allow extensions of those grants to municipalities to give them more time to complete those projects. And we anticipate next year that these results will be back up to more consistent with prior years. So I just wanted to highlight that. But the good news is over 5 years, we are able to report back that 200 municipal road miles have been improved through the VTrans and DEC funding provided to municipalities. And in addition to what the state is paying for, municipalities are probably doing a lot of work on their municipal roads as well to get them up to the municipal road general permit standards. And that will be captured through reporting through the municipal road general permit portal. And I believe Jim Ryan will get into that in a little bit. And this graph here shows our estimated phosphorus reductions associated with the developed land sector and state-funded projects implemented in that sector. This is currently, we're only able to estimate pollutant reductions associated with phosphorus in the Lake Champlain and in the Lake Memphremagog basins, but we're working on expanding our capacity to be able to produce these estimates statewide. And this shows that, again, we've really ramped up the efforts in this sector nearly exponentially over 2016 through to 2020. What it's showing are the estimated pollutant reductions, where you have the solid orange that shows the newly constructed projects each year and their estimated pollutant reductions. And in the striped boxes, that's showing the ongoing performance of prior implemented practices. So this really shows the importance of not only implementing new practices, but that we continue to maintain the practices and those investments that were already made so that they continue to perform and to provide that phosphorus reduction benefit. So the good news is, to your point, Senator Kitchell, that we are making a lot of progress, not only with those programmatic building blocks, rolling out the permit and the funding programs, but these data show us that this work is resulting in measurable results related to implementation.
Senator Mazza.
Okay.
Wait
And
a minute, Senator Perchlik's got a question.
oh, my apologies.
No, it's okay. I assume it's okay, Senator Mazza. The question is, how many kilograms of phosphorus do we need to reduce? Like how significant is 800 kilograms in comparison to what we'd really need to reach the goal? Is that like, do we need 8,000 or do we need 1,000? You know what I mean? I'm just trying to get a sense of how close we are with this progress that we've made, which is great, but I just don't know how that relates to what the need is.
It's a great question. So we, in part 2 of the report, we summarize how far we've come implementing the Lake Champlain Tmdl. We are about 13% of the way to our goal. So we still have a ways to go. And it should be noted that in the case of the municipal roads general permit, we are just getting into the implementation phase this year. So a lot of the implementation that we see here was almost early adoption of the municipal road general permit standards. And so we do anticipate in the coming years that through a lot of the stormwater regulatory timelines that progress is really going to ramp up. But yes, we are about 13% of the way there based on our estimates to meeting the Lake Champlain Tmdl reduction targets. Most of those reductions we're able to account for currently are associated with the agricultural sector, mainly because agriculture has a lot of federal funding that is being leveraged, highly cost-effective practices, and we are able to account for most of those reduction benefits in our tracking efforts, while technical efforts are underway to fill in gaps with other sectors. So I guess the long story short, we are about 13% of our way there, and we still have a ways to go. But I think it's about where we expect it to be at this point based on the rollout of regulatory programs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and before I wrap up, I wanted to highlight that the data set that we use to prepare the performance report each year is accessible online as well. We have a new Clean Water interactive dashboard that takes those data and makes it available online and gives you the ability, or your constituents the ability, to filter those data depending on your interests. The screenshot I show here on the left is filtering down state investments to the road sector, and you can explore those data a little bit further. And I'll also highlight on the right-hand side, I have a screenshot of our Clean Water Project Explorer that gives you the ability to search for projects. Here I'm showing a search of all the road projects that have been funded by the state of Vermont since state fiscal year 2016 statewide. And for each of these points on the map, you can click on them and view a project-specific report that you have the ability to download, share with interested parties, or print out. So I definitely would encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look at this Clean Water Project portal. There's a link at the bottom here, and explore some of these data online.
It seems like part of the report, I think this was one that Rebecca Ellis maybe was involved in designing from the get-go. There's also, which tends to be of interest to specific senators, and that is by watershed. So like if Senator Ingalls was particularly interested in Memphremagog, which he probably is because he doesn't want his boat in slimy waters, to put it bluntly, I think we can go in and identify by watershed, and it gives a sense of what the effort looks like statewide. Because there isn't a region of the state really that isn't dealing with an impairment, whether it's Memphremagog. Like there's a tendency to view it as Lake Champlain, but it really is much broader than that. And obviously, those of us along the Connecticut River are seeing the impact of a different type. But there's a lot of data in here, and oftentimes it's helpful because people want to say, well, how am I benefiting from it? What is my particular area or the watershed that I'm in? But it's like so many things. There's so much data. It's just knowing about it and accessing it.
That's a great point. If on this interactive dashboard, you can click on which watershed you're interested in. So if you wanted to just see these investments filtered down to Lake Memphremagog, you can select the Lake Memphremagog watershed from the map, and it would filter all these data down. In addition, on the Explorer, you can filter by basin and pick the basin or the county of the state that you'd like to take a look at more closely. And I'll also highlight that Appendix A, our watershed summaries, are a really valuable resource because it takes all of the data in the report and summarizes it down to those watersheds. And it also includes a map where you can see how the boundaries of the watershed relate to political boundaries. So the state board boundaries, the county boundaries and town boundaries, how those fit into the watershed. So thank you for bringing that up, Senator Kitchell.
Thank you, Emily. Are you done with your presentation?
Yep, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions. And I believe Jim Ryan is up next.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems like Mazza got kicked off of Zoom, but we can proceed without him. If there's no questions for Emily, we'll go to Mr. Ryan.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Municipal Roads General Permit. Apologies in advance if you see me dabbing my face. I had a shaving accident this morning, and it's looking a little bit like a crime scene over here. I'm going to share my screen and jump right in. I work for Vermont DEC in the Watershed Management Division, and I run the Municipal Roads Program in the Stormwater section. And okay, can everyone see that? Okay. I'm going to just give a little background information for some context, and then I'll jump into a little bit about the municipal roads general permit requirements and where we are in our timeline. We have over 18,000 total road miles in the state of Vermont. 70% of those road miles are managed by municipalities. That's class 1 through 4 roads. It's approximately 13,000 road miles of town highway. If we break down the road class types of the municipal roads, the vast majority are class 3 roads at 65%. Those are your typical backcountry road, mostly gravel, ditched roads. We also have class 2, which connect different communities and are generally paved. Class 1 roads are a very small portion. Those are your village center roads for the most part, and maintained by both the municipality and VTrans. And class 4 roads, which constitute about 12%. The municipal roads general permit only applies to what we call hydrologically connected roads, or just connected roads. About 52% of the total municipal road miles fit into are categorized as connected road miles. And we consider a connected road as a municipal road that lies within 100 feet of a water resource, a municipal road that crosses or bisects a water resource or drains to it, or a municipal road that lies within the DEC river corridor GIS layer. We do a GIS analysis first to determine this connectivity, and then it's field verified during the road erosion inventory process. We bump out that proximity to 500 feet for our paved roads with catch basins or the closed drainage systems in the downtown areas. We consider a water resource to be a perennial stream, an intermittent stream, a wetland, or lake or pond.
Jim,
Yes.
can you go back a slide?
Sure.
Basically, my question, it seems like I'm having a hard time imagining a road that wouldn't meet those classifications. Like, don't all roads drain to a?
Senator, this slide that I have up here might be a good visualization for your question. This is a screenshot of the Agency of Natural Resources Atlas, and the white lines are the municipal roads. We have the stream layers and the lakes and pond layer on this layer here. You can see the purple segments are what we consider to be hydrologically connected. So it's essentially delineating road watersheds that drain to either a stream channel or lake or pond in a proximity analysis, or even a dry stream bed, where what we consider an intermittent stream if there's no water currently flowing in it. And you can see on this slide, the purple segments are the connected roads, and you can see where they either bisect a water resource or in this case, our close proximity to some of the lakes and ponds on this list. But we're finding through that criteria and then field verified that the number comes in. For each town, it varies a little bit depending on the elevations and the proximity to water resources, the amount of wetlands and lakes and ponds. But we're finding between 50 and 60% of municipalities' roads fall into the connected road categories.
So is on the bullet points on the prior slide, it has to be all of those? I took it as it just needed to meet one of those, but you're saying it has to meet all of those.
It just needs to be one of those.
So if it's any one of those, it seems like, so if a road crosses a stream, which part of the road is then hydrologically?
That's a really good question. We divide the roads into road segments, which are 100 meters in length. So we can determine if 328 feet or 100 meters, if each road segment, we can geolocate it with a segment identification number. We can determine the slope of the road, and so we can evaluate it to see if it meets our standards or not. And this way, we divide it up into smaller sections to get at your point. If we said the whole road of Smith Road, then you're absolutely right. Yeah. The whole road would be considered. But if we divide it into those segments, then we get down to that 50 to 60%.
And that's the same for all the bullet points. Any segment has to meet one of those points. So the 100 feet or drains, because all roads drain to a water eventually. So it's just each 100-meter section has to
Exactly.
meet one of those bullet points.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So we require the towns complete road erosion inventories for those connected road segments. And we just had the deadline of December 31st of 2020 for that requirement. We have road standards for different road types. We thought it made sense that those different roads that I put on the previous pie chart have different standards. We have a class 4 road standard. We have essentially the closed road drainage system. We call those paved roads with catch basins. That has a separate standard. And the vast majority of the roads fall into the paved and gravel roads with drainage ditches or your open drainage system. So we have separate standards for each of those categories. We have folks that towns generally subcontract out to the regional planning commissions or consultants, or some cases conduct the inventory themselves, and they determine if each road segment meets our standards or not. And we have 3 segment scores: a fully meets the standards, partially meets the standards, or does not meet the standards. And the 2 latter categories, partially and does not meet, both do not meet the standard. One is just a degree of how much work would be required to bring it up to the standards. These are some of the questions that we ask for the typical road types, the paved and gravel roads with open drainage systems. Does your road have a good crown? And we have a standard for that, which is 2% slope. Are your road shoulders lower than a travel lane? If so, water can shed off in perpendicular fashion. If they cannot shed water off, which we call distributed flow, does it have an adequate ditch? And the question that gets at whether it's adequate enough is based on the slope. If it's 8% or higher, is it stone lined? If it's less than 5% or less, it could be grass lined. If it's between 5 and 8%, we allow for other practices such as check dams and cross culvert disconnection culverts as well. We like to see that the end of the ditch is turned away from water, and if that's not possible, that what we call a turnout is stable, and we make sure that the drainage culverts and driveway culverts and intermittent stream culverts are not eroding. We have developed some tools to help assist municipalities in completing the road erosion inventories. We have developed, with the Agency of Digital Services, 2 different apps. One's called Survey 123. That is the actual checklist, if you will, to determine compliance categories, to see if the standards in place are in fact in place. And we also use Collector as a mapping tool. So you can actually click on a road segment here, and you can see the purple road segments are the connected road segments. You can click on the segment, and then automatically you can launch the survey or the road erosion inventory on the right-hand side of your screen. Based on our preliminary data from the inventories that we have thus far, we have found that 58% of the connected roads that have been assessed fully meet our municipal road standards, 20% partially meet, and 22% do not meet. So another way to think about that is 42% would need to have some level of work done over the next several years.
I have a question.
Sure, Senator.
Going back to the percentage that don't meet, do they fall within primarily within one of the classes, like class 4, or I don't know, or in terms of the least traffic volume? I'm just wondering, are there certain, or is it just that the towns haven't got, not every town, of course, is, most have, I think it's over 80% have adopted the standards, but would they be the roads that are in the towns that haven't adopted the standards, or are there more characteristics of the segments themselves, and looking at that percentage?
That's a really good question, Senator. And I think it's a little bit of both. We have some, as Emily was indicating earlier, we have some very proactive early adopter towns that have completed their inventories very early in the process and have applied, been very proactive in applying for VTrans and DEC grant funding and have upgraded their roads already. And a lot of cases, it depends on the location of the town and the elevation differences. For example, a lot of towns may be close to Lake Champlain in Addison County with flatter slopes. It's really a lot of the scoring is slope driven as well. So when we see a lot of cases slopes above 10%, where maintaining a crown or stabilizing ditches is a lot more challenging than for some towns with flatter slopes. So we're seeing a lot of it is slope driven. In some cases, a lot of cases, it would be gravel roads on steeper slopes in what we call our gravel roads with open drainage systems, where we're finding a higher number or percent of roads that are not meeting our standards. And generally, paved roads meet our standards at a higher rate. To get at your question.
And Jim, what did you say? What the percentage of roads that has been surveyed or
inventoried?
Inventory,
yeah. Yeah, that's coming right up right after this slide, I believe. I'll just hone in on this slide first, and I'll be right over there. This is the data from the road erosion inventories using the apps that I mentioned before, go right into automatically get transferred into the Municipal Roads General Permit Implementation Table, or we call it the portal for short. And every segment analysis for that town that has been assessed and why it scored the way it did is included in the database. And I just pulled up an example of one of the queries that are in the portal. And this is a summary for the town of Addison. I just picked the first one on the list. And it just goes over the amount of total segments in the town. And again, a segment is 100 meters or 328 feet in length. There's 16 segments in a mile to give you a sense. So it's a very small size segment. Of the 660, we have 305 that are considered connected or close to water. And that's been field verified. And we have 224 of that 305 connected that fully meet the standards already. And so we have 63 segments that partially meet and 18 segments that do not meet. And we have, if we don't have enough data to complete the compliance score, we put that in there as incomplete data. And this town has field assessed 98% of their segments. And on the bottom, what I have highlighted there, one of our implementation requirements is that towns have to upgrade 15% of their non-compliant connected road segments by December of 2022. And I'll get into a little bit more of that later, but we just wanted to highlight in this town, in the town of Addison, 13 segments would have to be brought up to the standards before December 31st, 2022. And so that's under a mile, to give you a sense of what that is. 16 segments is approximately a mile. And this is from the baseline inventory and then does not take into account what they have done for work since the baseline inventory. So in other words, they may be ahead of that and have to implement less than the required there. And to get at your question, Senator, at the bottom, we have approximately 94% of towns have completed a road erosion inventory. And I just wanted to highlight that we have, for the first 3 years of the program, we've had 100% compliance for the program. So this is out of 248 towns that are included under the permit. We have 100% compliance as far as fees and permit requirements in the first 2 years of the permit in 2018 and 2019. In 2020, we have 247 out of 248 towns that are what we call fee compliance. We have, as I mentioned, 94% of towns have completed their road erosion inventories. The deadline just passed less than 2 months ago as far as submitting the road erosion inventories. And we have about 60% of towns that have filled out the other components of the requirements, which is also, they have to fill out a one-page form and pay a processing fee of $240 that we have some stragglers there that we need to attend to. And where we are in the timeline, the permit kicked in January of 2018. We had a lot of public meetings and working with our partners at VTrans, the local roads and better roads programs, and the district garages, and the regional planning commissions and the League of Cities and Towns in developing the permit. Over a 2-year period, we have given towns 2 years to complete their road erosion inventories. So that started January 2018, and the deadline was last December of 2020. Now we go into the implementation phase where we are requiring towns to implement and upgrade their roads to the new standards. And the first requirement or benchmark is that 15% number that I mentioned before. 15% of non-compliant road segments have to be brought up to the standards by the end of 2022. And as Emily mentioned before, largely through the Better Roads Grant Program and the Grants and Aid Program, we have a lot of towns that have been very proactive, early adopters, and we have over 200 miles that have been upgraded thus far. And this is, I just extended the timeline out to 2036, where we are requiring towns to bring all of their connected roads up to the standards over that 18-year period of time. And we have a couple of benchmarks in between, as I mentioned, the 15-year benchmark, 15% benchmark of implementation by the end of 2022. That's about 7.5% of their non-compliant roads per year. And we have very high priority segments, as I mentioned before. Those are segments on steep slopes, have to be upgraded by 2025 and 2028, depending on the road type. And I'll just quickly mention that we have, in addition to our grant funding that I mentioned, we do a lot of training and outreach. We have some road table, we call roads roundtable forums that we work with VTrans local roads program are coming up. We have one tomorrow, actually. We also have a small equipment grant. We try to provide towns with the resources that would assist them in implementing this program. And this is just a screenshot of the Municipal Roads General Permit website. And I just wanted to point to a couple of the new items that right here. We have the newsletter, which I believe senators have been included in your packet for today. And I don't think we will have time to go over that, but there's a lot of good information in there for the 2021 MRGP newsletter. And we have a new compliance status link here. So we could check which towns are compliant and why they might not be compliant. Where any town, we can click on that and look at that.
Great, thanks for all that information. That's a good
Sure.
update. Are there any questions for Jim before we move on? All right, seeing none. On the agenda, Joel is next. Here you go, if you're ready.
Thank you.
I am ready.
Oh.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Joel Perigo. I am serving as the Interim Municipal Assistance Program Manager. And just going to talk a little bit about the funding assistance that is available to municipalities through VTrans, funding a lot of the work that Jim was just kind of speaking of, and Emily touched on it a little bit earlier. Some of this is going to be kind of duplicative of my budget testimony, similar to that, but we can work through it. So one program that we have is the Better Roads program. Last year, we invested $1.4 million into that program with various sorts, T funds and clean water funds. And for some reason, I can't see my bullets here, but in state fiscal year 21, we made some updates to the program to put greater emphasis on compliance with the Municipal Roads General Permit, giving preference to projects that have applied that will bring those segments that Jim was talking about into full compliance with the permit. We started tracking pre and post construction status so that we can better provide accurate reporting to Emily and her team. And through our application materials, started promoting the use of DEC's MRG portal for reporting purposes, both for road erosion inventories and the work that the towns are completing on their own. Grants and aid program is in its transition year, moving from DEC to VTrans in state fiscal year 21. We got a late start with state fiscal year 21 due to COVID. This year, we are still entering into a contractual agreement with the Northwest Regional Planning Commission, as DEC has in the past. Again, late start. Normally, towns would have probably done some work and be gearing up for the spring work, but we're just getting municipalities signed up now. We have 203 municipalities signed up for state fiscal year 21. And then starting in state fiscal year 22, the grants and aid program will be fully administered by VTrans staff, which will result in about $500,000 of additional funds getting out to municipalities for actual construction work, getting rid of some of that administrative time. And then it also provide an opportunity for municipalities to combine or at least back up grants and aid projects to better roads projects. And that was a $3.5 million investment in state fiscal year 21.
Joel, those I know in the past that there's been an issue about those signs. Are you putting those signs up on every project? Is that a requirement that the sign be set up?
It's not a requirement on every project, quite honestly, because some of the projects that we do with grants and aid and better roads are done, within just a couple days time. I'd have to look. I think it has to be at least a 2-week duration of the project before the sign is required. And so we do put some materials in our grants awards that says, we would encourage you to put up a sign. We make them available through our district offices, but we only require them when they hit that mark of 2 weeks.
Okay, thanks.
That was a topic. Putting signs up actually is a subject of discussion because it brings home to people where they're seeing their money at work. The federal government routinely does it in terms of the project. We see it with USDA funding, but as a practice in terms of the state spending, it's quite invisible at times. So that's why we've had the discussion. What mechanisms do we use so that Vermonters can see how their money is benefiting them?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a logistical challenge for us, just in the fact that, the entity, the Better Roads and Grants and Aid that are providing the funding are centrally located in Montpelier, and then just getting signs out to the municipalities. We only have so many to go around. We locate them as best as we could with our district offices. I don't have a good sense of how often they're being utilized, on a voluntary basis. But I understand. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
2 other programs that we make available to municipalities are actually federally funded. The Municipal Highway and Stormwater Mitigation Program and the Transportation Alternatives Program. I touched on this a little bit in my budget testimony that the TA program, Transportation Alternatives, we have a set aside for the environmental mitigation category, and then the remainder is for the more traditional TA projects, the sidewalks and that sort of thing. In state fiscal year 21, there was a $1.9 million investment, federal highway funds, in these 2 programs. They're both done as an annual solicitation, and our coordination with these programs with DEC includes basically reaching out to them during the application phase. Once we receive the applications, we run it through various entities at DEC, including Clean Water Initiative programs, the Municipal Roads program, work with the stream alteration engineers, the Watershed Basin program, just to make sure that we are essentially funding projects that they would support. And so I only focused on state fiscal year 21. I'm happy to provide this information, for other years. This is probably you can probably find all of this in Emily's Clean Water Investment Report also, but with the $6.9 million that we invested in state fiscal year 21, we funded 8 federally funded projects that included rain gardens, stormwater treatment systems, and slope stabilization projects. With the anticipation that the grants and aid program will fund 203 municipal projects, we anticipate over 1,100 road segments being brought into compliance with the MRGP, which is about 70 miles of roadway, and overall just successfully helping municipalities fund and assist with Vermont's Clean Water Act. That's all I had today.
Okay, great. That update. Any questions for Joel? Mazza's phone and internet seems to be out, so we'll continue unless we hear. Liz is trying to get hold of him to see if he wants us to do anything different with that. We'll just move on with V-Trans folks on this, which I think you have one more person. Jen, Callahan.
Yeah, I am Jen Callahan from Vermont Agency of Transportation. I work in the Maintenance Bureau in the Water Quality section. Go ahead, Joel. So I'm going to talk mainly about what we do for our infrastructure and our roads for water quality. So just a brief overview. I'm going to try and go quickly. I know we're behind on time here. Just to touch a little bit on where our water quality staff is within the agency. We have an environmental planner in our policy planning and intermodal development division. And then within the highway division, we have a couple of stormwater management engineers that focus mainly on scoping, design, and development of projects and permits. And then within the construction bureau, we have a construction environmental engineer whose main focus is to monitor construction for compliance with environmental regulations. And then where I am in the maintenance bureau, we have 5 stormwater technicians who help with various things, policy, procedure, and mainly what we focus on is making sure we're in compliance with state and federal stormwater regulations. On top of that, throughout the whole agency, we have a lot of folks such as Joel or designers who, other planners who actually touch on a lot of this. We've tried to integrate it throughout the agency over the years. Next slide, Joel. So that's not coming up for me, but let me see.
And I don't know, technical difficulties.
I can.
I have a backup. Hold on.
Okay. We were trying to avoid technical difficulties by not having to change sharing screens, and that backfired on us. While he's bringing, yep, there you go. So Act 64, I think we're all fairly familiar with that. What that did for us mainly was within the phase 1 implementation plan, the Agency of Natural Resource issued us our TS4 permit. The TS4 is a transportation separate storm sewer system, and that was effective November of 2017. Go ahead, Joel. Under that, just to talk a little bit about the main points that are under there, it's kind of an umbrella permit. It brings in all of the requirements that we had in various different permitting entities under one permit. It brought in the MS4 permit, which you're familiar with. A lot of the municipalities, especially in Chittenden County, have to comply with. That has public education and participation, asset management, mapping, inventory, and spill prevention and source control. It also contains the multi-sector general permit, which covers discharges from certain industries. For us, that is our 9 state airports, and we also have 3 state gravel pits that we run. And then the state operational stormwater discharge permit is rolled under there. Essentially any project that creates an acre or more of impervious needs to do post-operational stormwater treatment, and so that's under there. And then I think, what we're focusing mainly on today is our Tmdl requirements are also within the TS4 permit. And so for us, our main Tmdls that we focus on are the stormwater Tmdl, or stormwater impaired watersheds, and phosphorus impaired. So next slide. Go ahead. The stormwater impaired watersheds are mainly in the Chittenden County area. There are a couple up in St. Albans and one down in Rutland. And so for that, we have to develop flow restoration plans, and we did that quite a few years ago now. And we are into implementing those plans. And so in the past year, we completed construction of retrofits for Ellenbrook, which is in Williston. You might have seen that driving on 89 over the past summer or so around the Welcome Center. And then we are finalizing design of some additional work in the Rugg and Stevensbrook, which are the ones up in the St. Albans area. And then we'll move on to Centennial, Indian Moon, the other watersheds. That has a completion date of December of 2032 that we have to have all of those built and implemented. And one of the things that we have also been doing when we started with the stormwater impaired watersheds, those are looking at flow and holding, making the flow mimic better the natural conditions, not necessarily focusing on phosphorus. But then with a lot of these watersheds are embedded within the Lake Champlain Tmdl. So we have been, when we're doing final design, reevaluating the BMPs that go in for phosphorus treatment. So we are also getting phosphorus treatment for these projects, which takes us to the Lake Champlain Tmdl. This past year was actually a busy year for us, even with COVID. We submitted back in April our generalized phosphorus control plan. And then in October, the way that our regulations are set up is that every 4 years, we have to create a 4-year implementation plan, which is much more detailed, specific about what we're going to do to implement 25% of our overall phosphorus control target. So we completed that, the first one of those, and submitted it in October. And then every 4 years, you'll see that we will be developing those. And then once they're submitted, we'll start implementing them. And the completion date for that, of course, is 2036. So overall, the interesting thing, I think, is that on our first 4-year implementation plan and looking what had been done, we believe we've already reached about almost half, not quite half of our target for that 25%, which roughly lines up with what Emily was saying about the 13% that they were doing it. So it seems pretty consistent there. I think we can go to the next slide. And so this is just a graph of our estimated budget projections for our clean water investment programs here. And you'll notice there's some blips at almost every 4 years at 2024, just before 28 and 32, and those coincide with those 4-year implementation plans that I was talking about that we have to develop. Those take quite a bit of work to develop. So I think that's probably it. If there's any specifics you would like to know about, let me know. I don't want to take up too much more time.
Thank you, Jane. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one question, Senator Perchik. One of the
Go
other
right,
things.
go right ahead. I'm back in the meeting. Continue on because I don't know how long I'm in here. I'm having problems with the computer.
Oh, I don't
Go
know.
ahead.
Have you paid your bill lately?
Oh my God! Nothing more can go wrong. My store, half of the power is gone in my store, and since 2 o'clock yesterday. So so all of a sudden I'm on your call. I'm in the thing, and that cuts down. So go right ahead and continue because I don't know how long I'm going to be on here. Go ahead.
This is just more of a general question. One of the other benefits of the standards is that the roads not only does it help with erosion and pollution, but it also makes them more resilient to weather events. I was just wondering, have we actually experienced the benefit of that? Because the argument has been it may cost a bit more upfront, but there's a longer term benefit because these roads are able to handle weather events with lesser damage than would have been the case. So I just wondered, in recent weather events in the last couple of years, has that actually proven to be true?
So we know for sure that there's a lot of these co-benefits, and we are trying to target our implementation to that. And to that length, we are developing or working through something similar to the roads general permit for our roads. And we have been looking at different segments of our roads, and I can't give you a specific number at this point. I could probably go back, but I know that generally speaking that we've been looking at and we've been able to see places where there have been improvements put on in the past that, made it through a storm better than other places that didn't. I can't unfortunately pull out any specifics right now, but I know that we've seen some places in doing that did have some success on that.
Okay.
And I expect that, as we go forward and do more field work, we're going to find that more and more.
Should you have to use less material on the dirt roads too? I'm assuming there'd be less erosion, basically.
I'm sorry, we don't have any. Well, we have very few dirt roads.
Yeah, I guess it's not for you. I guess that's for the town permits, not more.
Yeah, but what we do have is on the edge of pavement and the shoulders, we'll see a lot of erosion, and so putting some treatment in those areas, can really help with that. There's quite a bit of erosion that we can find, especially in culvert outlets and places like that. That a little bit of tension there can make a big difference, especially in coming storms.
Okay, great. So was that the end of your presentation, Jen?
I believe so.
Okay, so Senator Maz, I think we're done with this unless there's other questions or conversations about the water quality.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, that's yeah. Why don't you? I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how long I'm going to be on here because this thing is. We got a power shut down now. Some transformer went, and I'm going to lose everything here in a few minutes. So I would just assume. What's our next item?
The next item was your favorite item.
Okay. Can we put that off? Because I just want to cut.
Yeah.
If I'm cut down, can we put that off to another day?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I think you need to take care
that.
of your home emergency.
Well, this is a mess here today. Yesterday, something happened on one of the poles here, and half of my stores got powered, half of my equipment shut down, and so now they're going to shut the power off completely to change over something. So, if I could ask permission to postpone the next item till a later date.
Yeah, no, we can work with Liz on figuring.
Okay. All right. So why don't we end it here today, unless there's some objections, and we're all set until tomorrow. I hope I'm all back on shape. So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate
Hold on,
the patience.
Senator Mazza.